How to get permanent residence on an innovator visa. That's the subject of this video. I'm Tom Bradford, I'm a lawyer in the UK. Thanks very much for joining me again for another video on innovator visas. What we're going to do is start with how you can get endorsed if you're interested in applying for an innovator visa in the UK. I'd be very happy to speak with you about that and your potential other options. So in this diagram that I'm going to show you today, we're going to cover all of the key things that you need to bear in mind. I'll just show you the overall diagram. I've put this together with some effort, but I'm doing this as a live stream, so you'll just have to bear with me. Okay, I'll show you the rest of the diagram now. So we're going to go over who can be endorsed. Let's just go back a bit more. I'm going to cover all of the key provisions. Let's just have a look here. There we are. Thanks for your patience. So we're going to look at the innovator visa process, who can be endorsed, the application process, how you apply for permanent residence at the end of the process. Here that's called indefinite leave to remain. And then we're going to look at innovator teams as well, how you can apply as an innovator team and what you need to bear in mind if you're applying as an innovator team. Okay, good. So thanks for your patience. The benefit of having this as a live stream is if you have any questions, although you have to put up with my delays, if you have any questions, you can put them in the live stream and I'll answer them at the end of this live stream. So let's go to the first point. And the first point I wanted to make is this: when you're thinking about applying for permanent residence at the end of the process, of course, this will be an objective that you'll have in mind. You'll have and most of my clients have dual objectives. Number one, they want to secure residency. Number two, they want to further the commercial objectives of their business. They may in some cases have existing businesses, or they're starting new businesses in the UK as in under this route. One of the things you need to bear in mind is that you can't invest in an already trading company. Now let's just have a look at how this is expressed in the rules. Now I'm just going to zoom out. So the rules say who can be endorsed, and I won't read all of this out, but it says here the categories are not designed, the categories being the startup visa and innovator visa, they're not designed for people who are establishing a business that's not innovative, viable or scalable, or joining an already trading business. And it says here the tier 2 skilled work route may be more appropriate. And it also says it's not appropriate for those who are seeking to invest into an already trading business. And it says the tier 1 investor category may be more appropriate. So this is an important point. You can be a co-founder of a business, or you can be sole founder of a business under this route, but you can't invest into an already trading company. Now that's already trading. That doesn't exclude the possibility of incorporating first, but there's an important distinction to bear in mind here. Under the startup visa route, if you incorporate first, then you can potentially disqualify yourself. Under the innovator visa route, this is the point to bear in mind. If you're starting your business in the UK, you can't just be investing into an already trading business, but you could invest into a new co that has not begun trading. So maybe that you've already incorporated in the UK, and you're then seeking to build up the business under and come here on a permanent basis under the innovator visa route. So in that case, if the company's incorporated, it's not necessarily a problem. It's only if it's been trading that you can't be in a position where you're simply investing into a business. So you can start your own business as a sole founder. What you can't do is, like you used to be able to do under the tier 1 entrepreneur category, is simply invest into an already trading company and be a silent partner, if you like, in the business. This is a route for founders, not investors. Now, the interesting thing about the guidance here that I've just read out is, did you see it referenced the tier 1 investor category? So if you have 2 million to invest, then you can do this. You can invest into an already trading company, of course. What you would need to do, and this is obviously I've produced other videos on this channel about the tier 1 investor route. What you'd need to do is do that via a portfolio manager, even if you had a specific company in mind that you're investing into. So there are people under the tier 1 investor route who just invest into one company rather than having a portfolio. Many of my clients who've come under the tier 1 entrepreneur route will have vanilla type portfolios that they'll secure through a portfolio manager who will invest their money for them according to their risk profile into well-known companies. But in some cases you might have a specific investment target in mind. You'd still need a portfolio manager to do that, to fulfill the investment criteria and the evidential criteria for tier 1 investor. Now, the other interesting reference here is to the tier 1 skilled work category in terms of joining an already trading business. Now, again, I've produced other videos on this on tier 2. To do this, the company would need to have a license. You might need to advertise depending on what your role is. And there's minimum salary levels to bear in mind. Also, it takes 5 years rather than 3 years. Interesting thing about the innovator visa route is it only takes 3 years. Now, to do that, on the only other way of doing that is to do a tier 1 investor application at 5 million, or to come in under the exceptional talent route, for which the threshold is pretty high. So bear that in mind. Most of my clients are using this route, the innovator visa route, to set up new entities of which they're basically the sole founder. But bear in mind, if you've got more than one person in your team, and entrepreneurial teams are permitted under this category without limit, but if you are doing it, then you've got to bear in mind, you've got to have a think about how you're going to satisfy the criteria for indefinite leave to remain. Because as you'll see shortly, each person has to fulfill 2 criteria. And the more members you have in your team, the more potentially challenging it can be for you. And you'll see why in a moment. So good. So let's see if we can go back to the diagram. So I've made the point there. The next point I wanted to make was in relation to the application process, and I've got more and more insight into this as I do these new visa routes. They are still new, obviously only introduced since April. But this is the sort of time frame you might be looking at. So the first step is the business plan. Let's just see if I can zoom in on this bit of the diagram. So the business plan. My clients will often already have a business plan ready, but it may be that it needs some work to illustrate exactly what the innovation consists of, and also what the plan is if they're going to be developing, if they're going to be applying for a patent at some point and developing new technology and doing research and development, then that will need to be reflected. If they're not going down the research and development route, but instead it's about they're going to qualify for permanent residence through actually employing people in the UK, then again that will need a plan around it. Because again, as you'll see in a moment, once you get to the point of applying for permanent residence, you've got to be endorsed or ask for an endorsement from your endorsing body, which confirms that you've met the criteria as expressed in your endorsed business plan. So the formulation of that original business plan is extremely important, because there's got to be continuity. And you can understand why that's the case from the Home Office's perspective. What they're looking for from a policy perspective under this route is people who are adding value, where they have a business plan and they're developing that consistently over a 3-year period, not doing lots and lots of different businesses necessarily. Although obviously there are ways of pivoting within this route, but really you want your original business plan to have been implemented, and the 50,000 invested, which is one of the criteria. You want the 50,000 to have been invested actively in progressing the business plan and actively spent in relation to that, not in the form of a director's loan, for example. So there's the business plan. Then if we just move along this diagram, I'll just see if I can zoom in a bit more. So being endorsed, I mean, how long does it take? I mean, really, you could be endorsed, within a matter of a week, potentially, depending on what, where you are with your business plan and your idea, and depending on whether you're applying for a startup visa or innovator visa. But the time frame can be pretty short, and then you'll get your endorsement letter. Now, you'll then be looking to apply, and I and my team will prepare your application for you, help you with that and the supporting documents. And you could expect to do that, make the application within the second week. That's the second week of instructing me. Then in terms of processing time, it could be considered within a week, although there's no published processing times yet. Once you've got the endorsement, it should be a relatively straightforward process. Under the innovator visa, you've got to demonstrate the access to 50,000, and that's got to have been in your account for 3 months under the main rule. So there'll be the usual way of satisfying the criteria and showing bank statements to evidence that. But then you'll get your entry clearance, and you'll come into the UK to then pick up your residence permit. Now, that needs to be done within 30 days. Now, in terms of the overall time frame, though, if you are instructing me, but you want some time to play with, as it were, you want to control the time frame because you've got commitments that you're managing, that is achievable, because you've got 3 months to apply for the visa from the point at which you get the endorsement letter, and then you've got 30 days from the point that you get your vignette, your entry clearance, to then pick up your biometric residence permit. So we can basically flex the timetable according to your needs. So that's the application process. Let's see if we can go on to the next bit of the diagram. So this next part of the diagram is really important. I'm just going to zoom in on the key part of it. So there's a few ideas I'm trying to get across here. Let's move down a tiny bit more. Right, so this sets out the overall the overall period. So you're looking at a 5-year time frame. It only takes 3 years to qualify for permanent residence. As I say here, it's called indefinite leave to remain. And if we focus in on that bit, within this period, and this is a question I get asked a lot, there we are, we'll just zoom in there. Within this period, the question is, how long do you need to be in the UK? Now, you need to spend all the time that you're in the UK working on your business, and the idea of the visa route is you work on the business exclusively. If you need to be abroad, then in order to qualify for indefinite leave to remain, as long as you control your absences so that you're no more than 180 days absent in any 12 months within that 3-year period, then you can still qualify for indefinite leave to remain. So let's just have a look at the actual provision. So I've cut that out here for you. So continuous residence. Applicants for settlement in the innovator category must have continually resided in the UK for at least 3 years immediately prior to the application. In determining if an applicant meets the requirement for continuous residency, you must be satisfied that the applicant has not had combined absences from the UK in excess of 180 days in any 12-month period. So you just need to carefully plan your residence accordingly. And many of my clients will, obviously by the nature of this category in their business, will be required abroad. In fact, it's a requirement when you apply for the innovator visa that you have the ability to access international markets. So in other words, you have an international business. So it'd be surprising if people didn't need to be abroad a lot during the period of this visa, and it's kind of expected that you will be abroad, but you've got to manage your residence accordingly. So that doesn't mean 180 days in, 180 days out. If you look at the language, it references combined absences in any 12-month period. So that can be read as a sort of rolling 12-month period. So any 12-month period that you specify within that, whether it's from January to January or April to April in any particular interval, you need to make sure that you have that the combined absences in that period do not exceed 180 days. So let's zoom out again. Okay, now here we're coming to the crux of the matter. In fact, before I move on, let's just have a look at the indefinite leave to remain document. Let me zoom in on that. So this is what it looks like. If you apply for an innovator visa and you get settlement, you'll get this card. So settlement, indefinite leave to remain, biometric residence permit. Once you've got that, you can do any kind of work in the UK. You're not restricted to your business. So many of my clients will have other businesses on the go, so they can switch back to those other businesses. Now, bear in mind that you do not have to have, when exclusivity is referenced, and you need to get that idea that you can only work on your UK business. That does not exclude you from taking passive income from elsewhere. It prevents you from working on other businesses. But if you can switch your perhaps an overseas business or another business that you may have onto a passive basis and have it managed and draw passive income from that, there's nothing objectionable about that under this category. The idea, though, is that you've got to work on your UK business exclusively. So you can't have your fingers in too many pies. You've got to switch your other businesses onto a passive silent partner basis, if you like. But that is the card. That's the biometric residence card that you would get. And 1 year after that, because you need 1 year free before applying for British citizenship, so that's applying to naturalise as a British citizen, you will then be able to apply for that and apply for your British passport. So that can be done at year 5. So let's zoom out again and go down to the settlement criteria. So what do you need to do in those 3 years in order to get permanent residence? I'm going to go, first of all, I'm going to answer the question. So there's 7 ways that you can do this. And these are the 7 criteria, and I'm going to explain what, in my view, are the best ones or the most straightforward ones for qualifying. So let's go through these one by one. So this quote begins: a settlement success criteria. Endorsing bodies must also confirm in their endorsement letter that an applicant has achieved at least 2 of the following. At least 50,000 has been invested into the business and actively spent furthering the business plan assessed in the applicant's previous endorsement. And the previous endorsement will typically be the endorsement that you get if you're working with me. you receive an endorsement from one of the endorsing bodies, that will be in respect of a business plan, and you've got to have invested the 50,000 furthering that business plan. So at least 50,000 has been invested and actively spent furthering the business plan. So in terms of my insight into that, is that's distancing itself, this provision and the associated legislative provisions in the immigration rules. It's distancing itself from the tier 1 entrepreneur category, in which you could effectively have a director's loan. So you would loan 200,000 into the business and then secure that back at the end of the period. So you can understand why that led to contrived situations, or situations where people were simply going through the motions in relation to their business, rather than actually, in the language of the government, actively spending their money furthering the business plan. But there's an important point to bear in mind here, which is that the business plan has got to be solid, got to be bulletproof at the beginning. When the endorsement letter is given, then that kind of shuts you down a bit, or commits you heavily to the investment of the 50,000 in respect of that business plan. So that's really important. And I think that if you're doing research and development, I'll come on to that in a moment, then that could properly form part of the 50,000 spend, or all of it, but certainly part of it. And so if you're doing that, then that R&D has got to be outlined. That vision for the R&D has got to be outlined in the original business plan. You can't just park that for later. So let's go to the next provision. Let's zoom in a bit more. So it says that this is the second criteria. The number of businesses' customers has at least doubled within the most recent 3 years, and is currently higher than the mean number of customers for other UK businesses offering comparable main products or services. Now, I'm sorry, but when this was drafted, and there was no consultation with the Practitioners Association when they drafted these provisions, what they meant is pretty unclear. Now, I do have a solution around this, which could satisfy the provision, but the reason why I would not go for this as your chosen criterion for settlement is, how do you assess the mean number of customers for other UK businesses offering comparable main products or services? That's going to be quite an ask, unless you're in a super specific niche. Now, you may be, and many of my clients are, and we are capable of defining that to meet the criteria. But the reality is, you only need to satisfy 2 of these, and this is the key point. And if you're going to do so, then I think there's too much potential uncertainty or room for disagreement around that for that to be your main focus. The next one is my chosen pathway, which is the business has engaged in significant research and development activity and has applied for intellectual property protection in the UK. So significant research and development. Now, there's been some discussion as to whether this is talking about applying for a trademark, so brand protection, essentially, in respect of you, your company, your product or service, or whether it's talking about a patent in respect of something that you've developed. Now, my clear view here is that it's got to be a patent application, because look, significant research and development activity is not generally going to be captured or fully protected by a trademark application. by a mark. So one way of reading this is to look at it separately. But I think, in other words, you could divide off the research and development from the IP protection and say that the IP protection is only in respect of the brand, but the research and development stands alone. But if that was the case, they would have actually put that as an independent criterion, and they haven't. They've combined the two, and they need to be read together. So this, in my view, refers to a pattern. For all of my clients' cases, will be doing both, applying for a patent and applying for a trademark. In cases where they are doing R&D, and all of my clients are doing that. So then let's have a look at the next one. Let's zoom out a bit. The business has generated a minimum annual revenue of 1 million in the last full year covered by its accounts. Now, I'm happy to go for that if that's realistic and achievable, and you think you can reach a revenue of 1 million, then there's going to be sufficient evidential and legal certainty around that to establish it. Not everyone's going to be able to achieve that, and you don't need to generate revenue within the 3 years. You do not need to generate revenue within the 3 years. You need to make reasonable progress with your business, and there are many famous examples. Facebook being one of them, Amazon being one of them, of scalable companies which this visa route is intended to facilitate, not making revenue until several years later. Now, you still have to make reasonable progress with your business, but that can take other forms. The next one, the business is generating a minimum annual revenue of 500,000 in the last full year covered by its accounts, with at least 100,000 from exporting overseas. That's fine. We can do that and prove it. All I'm saying is that these propositions are provable. If you're able to achieve these targets, then you can establish the criteria. But when the mean and average numbers of customers in your sectors is referenced, there's not enough certainty there for me to be able to recommend it as a target for my clients. The next one, the business has generated the equivalent of at least 10 full-time jobs for resident workers. Now remember, under the Tier 1 entrepreneur route, you only had to do 2 for 12 months. This is 10. So the threshold is much higher, but the salary isn't referenced. Now, you would need to hit the minimum salary if you were doing that. But if you look at the next provision, it says the business has generated the equivalent of at least 5 full-time jobs for resident workers, which have an average salary of at least 25,000 a year gross pay, excluding any expenses. So, the minimum wage is going to be less than that, significantly less than that per annum. But I think this is achievable as well. So the only criterion which I would warn against aiming for is that the number of your business customers has doubled and is higher than the mean number of customers for other UK businesses offering comparable main products or services. In the vast majority of cases, it will not be appropriate to rely on that and plan for that throughout the 3 years. You want to go for one of the other two. Now, which other two should you go for? Let's have a look. And my view is that in the majority of cases, obviously this will depend on your business model, your history and background, but in the majority of cases, you will want to go for being able to establish that you've invested your 50,000 into your business and that you've actively spent it furthering your business plan as assessed in the applicants in your previous endorsement. And then that's the first one. The second one is the intellectual property. That you've engaged in significant R&D activity and you've applied for intellectual property in the UK. Now, the interesting thing here is that you only need to apply for it. You only need to apply for a patent. You do not need to have been granted your patent. But ordinarily, there's at least a year lead-in period before you apply for a patent. And once you apply for it, there's a long process. It could take another 12 or 18 months, for example, of securing your patent. So I think that's the reason why here they've only required that you apply for it and not that you get it, because they recognize that in 3 years that might not be achievable. So those are the two routes which will be appropriate in many cases. Now, the other point I wanted to make, which I started by referencing, is this. What do you do if you're coming as an innovator team? Now, let's just have a look through these provisions together. They say applicants do not need to be the sole founders of their businesses. Whilst multiple innovators in the same company can receive endorsements, each applicant must have been endorsed for achievements in their own right. Where there are multiple innovators endorsed in the same category, the settlement criteria relied upon must have been multiplied by the number of innovators associated with the business. And then we have some examples. And just to backtrack a minute, there are different constellations of co-founders, if you like. One scenario is you already have a co-founder or a team. So I'm acting for two teams at the moment, one team of 3 and another entrepreneurial team of 2. That's one constellation where you already have your co-founders lined up. Another one is that you join a UK entrepreneur to be a co-founder. Now, remember what I said at the beginning. You can't join or invest into an already trading company, but you can become a co-founder with a UK entrepreneur and invest into the business. But you've got to be there at the inception stage. If the company's being incorporated, as long as you're going under the innovator visa route, that's not a problem as long as it has not started trading. The optimal situation there would be where you map out your vision with the UK entrepreneur. And there are a number of UK entrepreneurs looking for investment. One of the people I work with helps UK entrepreneurs connect with foreign investors. So if that's something of interest to you, do touch base with me. But if you're effectively looking to invest into a company, then you will need to have a look at the visa routes that the government in guidance referenced. As I said at the beginning, you need to think about whether you're going to go for innovator, investor visa, or tier 2. But just to highlight that there are different ways of starting on a co-founder basis. So let's see what you would actually then need to do. So applicants each using different success criteria. So you remember I said you need 2 of them, and I highlighted the ones that you need. If you have a co-founder, so there's 2 of you, then you're going to need 4. So the example here is that you created 10 jobs for resident workers and you've invested 50,000 into the business. The business has generated 1 million and it's done significant research and development. So I think that's a sensible 4 to go for and plan for as you're rolling out your business under this visa route. But bear in mind you do need 4 because you're going to need 2 each. So you may be in a situation where it might be more effective for you, if you're going to be endorsed, to separate out different elements of the business, depending on what your business is, of course. But if you've got several projects, to set them up independently. Otherwise, you might be in a position where you're competing for the same criteria. If only one person is going to be able to benefit from the significant research and development and then the application for patent, right? only one person is going to be able to benefit from the creation of the 10 jobs if you're co-founders. So you would need to apply for 20, sorry, you would need to apply on the basis that you had created 20 jobs. So 10 for each founder. And it may be more straightforward for you just to establish separate entities, assuming that your endorsing body is happy with that, and assuming that there is a sensible division of labour and of function. And just to highlight this point, there's another example here, which is that the 3 success criteria are met and 1 has been doubled. So an example, the applicants can demonstrate that they have at least 50,000 and the business has generated 1 million. So that covers one founder. And then the business is engaged in significant R&D and created 20 jobs for resident workers. And it says if you've identified settlement applications from other team members in the same business and it's not clear from the endorsement letter that enough success criteria have been met to cover all applicants, you should check this with the endorsing body. I mean, that but it goes without saying. What I want to highlight is that you should think about this from the very beginning of the process, so you're not disappointed when it comes to year 3. So that's my bit done. Thanks for your patience. It's the first time I'm trialing this diagram method of presentation, if you like. If you find this helpful, please let me know. If you don't find it helpful, again, let me know so I can change up. But what I want to do is present you with all the information in one diagram, essentially, and talk you through it. If you want a copy of this diagram, which sets out all of the key provisions, just contact me on WhatsApp on the number below, and put Innovator Visa in your message, and I'll message you and attach this diagram. If you want any help with the visa route, let me know and I'll be delighted to assist you. Now, before we go, I promised that I would have a look at any questions that have been put on this live stream, and great, I'm pleased to say there have been questions. Let me just have a look at this. So one of the questions is, can I get a settlement on a sponsor visit visa? So if you're being sponsored, then the answer to that is yes. If you're being sponsored on a tier 2 general work visa, then you'll secure settlement after 5 years. There is an extension stage, unlike with the innovator visa that we've been talking about on this video. If you're being sponsored for some other categories, then you may not get settlement. For example, a tier 2 intra-company transfer visa does not lead to settlement. The innovator visa does. Bear in mind that the startup visa does not. So if you apply for a startup visa, you get 2 years, and during that time you've got to switch to a settlement category. If you do want to settle, you can't extend it. The most natural fit is usually going to be switching to an innovator visa. If you can get straight onto an innovator visa, then as far as I'm concerned, you should. If you meet the criteria, you should go straight for that. Why have another 2 years in the UK and then switch? I think the only exception where someone does meet the innovator visa criteria, but is if they want to do other things, if they want to work on other businesses. Under the startup visa, they can work part-time for the minority of the time on other things. You have a right to work. You've got to still spend the majority of your time on your business. But for the innovator visa, you've got to spend all of your time on it exclusively. And obviously, you've heard my comments earlier about if you're leaving the UK and coming back in, that can be done, and you can take passive income from your other businesses or enterprises. So thanks very much for that question. Let's see if there's any other questions. So one of the other questions is, as a student, he talks about the challenges of getting a tier 2 visa, and the 50,000 route is quite a lot for a student. I mean, I think there's an important point here to be made about the startup visa and innovator visa. You do need 50,000 for the innovator visa. You don't for a startup visa. So there's no minimum criteria, no minimum funding criteria for the startup visa. But it's really important to bear in mind that there's an overriding test of financial viability. So if you're the person who's funding the business, you're the only person who's funding your business, and you don't have 50,000, are you going to be able to establish a business in the UK? I would suggest that in the majority of cases you will not be able to, because I mean, you tell me, what kind of businesses can you establish for 50,000 over a 3-year period? You're going to need significantly more capital than that. You're going to need at least 50,000, if I can put it that way, and ideally some form of passive income. Now, having said that, there are exceptions. If you do have something that's very compelling and you can start it you can begin it on a startup visa, you may be able to find funding from other sources. I do work with a fantastic partner who helps my clients raise investment for their businesses in the UK and secure grant funding. So touch base with me if you want to talk about that. What else is there to say about the startup visa? There are universities who give endorsements. So if you're a graduate at the moment, it might be worth speaking with them. But I've spoken with the majority of the universities who are endorsing bodies, and they basically say there's a very limited number of endorsements each year. So I'm talking low single figures most of the time. And the key point is most, if not all of them, cannot endorse for an innovator visa, and it's not a route to settlement. So if you can switch onto an innovator visa straight away, then that's going to be better. The other thing is, surely you need to think about it now, not when you're in the second year of your startup visa, because if you want to settle in the UK and you're switching from a tier 4 student visa, ideally you'd want to be in an incubator or accelerator and be with them for the 2 years on a startup visa and then switch into an innovator visa, rather than being in a university that isn't connected with any of the endorsing body incubators. And then you've got a problem later, which is you've got to switch into the incubator and you don't know them, they don't know you. So I'd suggest if you're a tier 4 student and you're looking at this route, touch base with me, contact me by email or WhatsApp. We can talk about how you can potentially be on a pathway with one of the incubator endorsing bodies or one of the accelerators, rather than going through the university route. Incidentally, I've got an interview with a successful entrepreneur applicant coming up on the channel soon, so look out for that. If you want to subscribe then and hit the notification bell, then you'll get a notification when I do that video. Let's just see if there's any other questions or whether we're done for now. I think I've answered the 2 questions which were put. There is a third one, sorry, about the business plan. So on the business plan, yeah, I mean, ideally you want a very good accountant, I think, to prepare your business plan rather than a business plan writer. The core idea in the business plan needs to come from you. Where I do assist clients is in the advisory stage in identifying, look, is there an innovative aspect of your existing business that can be used as a basis for an innovative visa application or one of the other visa routes? This is only one. There are others like sole representative, which might be relevant for you. So that's an important point. Other thing on the business plan is you're going to need a slide deck, which is going to look something like an investor slide deck for pitching to the incubators and accelerators. Most of them would expect to see that rather than a dry black and white document. You definitely need that dry black and white document, though, with the IP plan for the 3 years really nailed down before you get that endorsement. And I'd be happy to advise you on the process and on how you can secure the optimal business plan to meet the criteria and give you the best chance of success in applying for endorsement. Thank you very much for your time. I've answered the live stream questions. I'm going to be doing more of these live streams. If you do have any questions, you can also drop them to me in WhatsApp or in the YouTube comments below, or you can email me. If you WhatsApp me or email me, I will respond within the day and usually within a few hours. Thanks so much for your time, and bye for now.